I'm sitting in my living room staring at a $40 ATM receipt from a gas station on 4th and Elm. It's a Tuesday. My wife, Sarah, has been at her advanced yoga flow class for the last 2 hours. The studio is 10 miles in the opposite direction. I wouldn't have even found the receipt if she hadn't asked me to grab her sunglasses from her center console. I'm 34. We've been married for 6 years, together for 9. We were supposed to be closing on our forever home next month. Instead, I'm realizing that the woman I've built my entire life around is a stranger. I didn't scream. I didn't confront her when she walked through the door 20 minutes later, smelling vaguely of men's body wash instead of eucalyptus and sweat. I just smiled, asked how Downward Dog was, and started mentally dismantling our marriage, brick by brick. You read these posts and think, I'd know, I'd see the signs. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't come with a neon sign. It comes wrapped in routine $40 cash withdrawals, perfectly rehearsed smiles, and weaponized trust. Here is how I burned it all down. The $40 withdrawals were the first thread. Once I checked our joint account, I realized they were happening every Tuesday and Thursday, exactly $40, always from the same ATM, near 4th and Elm. Why cash? Because cash leaves no paper trail for cheap motel rooms or dinners at places we don't normally frequent. A week later, the second thread unraveled. I was doing yard work when Sarah pulled into the driveway. My phone, which was in my pocket, automatically synced to her car's Bluetooth because I had paired it weeks ago for a road trip and her phone was dead. Through her open car window, I heard the tail end of a phone call over her speakers. A man's voice said, "I know, babe. Thursday." It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was Greg. Greg is my brother-in-law, married to Sarah's younger sister, Chloe. My blood ran cold, but my brain went into hyperdrive. I didn't storm the car. I walked over, wiped sweat from my forehead, and asked if she could help me with the mulch. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "Let me just change out of my work clothes." I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. I didn't buy voice recorders or GPS trackers. That stuff gets thrown out in court and usually tips them off. Instead, I used what I already had access to, our shared cell phone plan. I logged in as the primary account holder and pulled the detailed billing logs, thousands of texts between Sarah and Greg. The volume spiked during work hours and on her yoga nights, but I needed to secure my exit strategy before dropping the bomb. We were in the middle of underwriting for a $600,000 mortgage. If I blew this up now, our finances would be a tangled mess and she could lay claim to my separate savings. I started digging into her personal mail. I noticed she had gone paperless on everything except one piece of junk mail from a major credit card company. I checked her credit report using the annual free disclosure we usually pull together. Twist number 3. Sarah had a secret credit card in her name with an $11,000 balance. I cross-referenced the dates of the account opening. It coincided perfectly with a girls' weekend she took with Chloe to Napa Valley last year. I managed to guess her password for the credit card portal. It was our wedding anniversary, ironically. The charges weren't from Napa. They were from a boutique resort 2 hours away. Chloe hadn't just been a passive bystander. She had actively covered for them. Chloe was the alibi. The betrayal compounded. It wasn't just my wife. My sister-in-law, who sat at my Thanksgiving table and drank my wine, was facilitating the destruction of my life. I spoke to a cutthroat divorce attorney the next day. He told me that because we were in an at-fault state, infidelity mattered, but financial infidelity mattered more. The secret debt was my golden ticket. If I could prove she was dissipating marital assets to fund an affair, I could leverage it in the settlement. Then came the hardest hit. 3 weeks into my silent investigation, Sarah sat me down on the couch, tears in her eyes, holding a positive pregnancy test. We had been trying for a year. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, looking genuinely overjoyed. I did the math. The timeline was muddy. It could be mine. It could be Greg's. The nausea that hit me was physical, but I forced the biggest, most convincing smile of my life. I hugged her. I cried fake tears of joy. I told her I loved her, and internally, I finalized my timeline. I told Sarah we needed to pause the house purchase. I blamed the underwriters, saying they found an anomaly in our debt-to-income ratio and needed a few months to clear it up. She panicked slightly, asking if they found anything weird. I played dumb. Just some old medical bill dispute, don't worry about it. Now, for Greg. Greg and I don't work for the same company, but he is a regional manager for a logistics firm that heavily relies on corporate expense accounts. Through Sarah's careless chatter over the years, I knew Greg had a habit of putting client dinners on his corporate card and paying himself back later. I anonymously mailed an envelope to his company's HR and compliance department. I included dates and times from Sarah's secret credit card statements, matching them with the dates Greg was supposedly entertaining clients, which I gleaned from his public LinkedIn posts bragging about those specific dates. I suggested they audit his travel expenses for those specific weekends. 2 weeks later, Sarah came home frantic. Greg had been fired. Gross misconduct and embezzlement. Chloe was hysterical. Sarah was unspooling. She lost her safe harbor. With Greg unemployed and facing potential legal action from his former employer, their affair went from a thrilling romance to a logistical nightmare. I watched her check her phone obsessively, her stress manifesting in snapping at me over small things. I remained the perfect, supportive husband. I waited until the end of her first trimester. I needed the paternity test. I ordered a discreet home DNA kit, swabbed the inside of my cheek, and collected a sample from her via a used toothbrush, consulting my lawyer on the legality of establishing my own peace of mind before the birth. The results came back to a private email address I had created. 0% probability. I was not the father. It was time. I planned it for Sunday family dinner at our house. Sarah's parents, Chloe, and an unemployed, sweating Greg were all sitting around my dining table. Sarah was glowing, rubbing her small bump. I stood up to make a toast. I raised my glass. I want to thank everyone for being here. I started, my voice steady. This is a big year. We were supposed to buy a house, we have a baby on the way, and there have been a lot of changes. Sarah smiled at me. Chloe looked down at her plate. Greg looked like he was going to vomit. But I realized, I continued, that I can't afford a new house when my wife has $11,000 in secret credit card debt. The room went dead silent. Sarah's face dropped. And I pulled a neat stack of folders from the sideboard behind me, tossing one in front of her parents, one in front of Chloe, and one in front of Greg. I also can't raise a child that belongs to my brother-in-law. Chaos erupted. Sarah's mother gasped. Chloe turned violently to Greg, screaming. Sarah just stared at me, all the color draining from her face. She tried to speak, to deny it. But I just held up the printed phone logs and the paternity test results. I know about the $40 withdrawals for the motel. I know about the Napa trip, Chloe, you covered for them. And Greg, I looked dead into his eyes. I guess you have plenty of free time now that you were fired for expensing your affair on the company dime. I walked to the front door, grabbed my pre-packed duffel bag, and looked back at Sarah. She was sobbing, reaching out, realizing in real time that the secure, loving life she had taken for granted was completely gone. My lawyer will contact yours on Monday, I said. Do not call me. I left them in the burning wreckage of their own making. Because I had meticulous documentation of the financial infidelity and the affair, the divorce was brutally fast. My lawyer used the threat of exposing the full extent of her fraud in public court records. She settled. I kept my retirement, my savings, and the equity in our current home. She walked away with her secret debt and a pregnancy by an unemployed, disgraced man. She tried to call me a dozen times a day, leaving voicemails begging for forgiveness, saying it was a mistake, that I was the only man she truly loved. It wasn't love. She just missed the safety net. Update, 6 months later. It's been half a year since the dinner party from hell. The divorce is finalized. Chloe divorced Greg. She apparently didn't mind covering for a little flirting, but the reality of a full-blown affair and a baby broke her tolerance. Greg moved into a tiny apartment, working a massive step down in his industry because his reputation was nuked. Sarah is living with her parents. Her mother is deeply traditional and essentially treats Sarah like a pariah in her own childhood home. Sarah reached out to me one last time last month. She sent a long email talking about how she destroyed the best thing she ever had, how the thrill wasn't worth the absolute devastation of her life. She said she wakes up every day regretting it. I didn't reply. I just deleted it, put on my running shoes and went for a jog in my new neighborhood. I bought a house on my own. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and it's entirely mine.